BBC4 on 1984 night, looking back now at the genesis and influence of Orwell's book concept of Room 101.
What is in Room 101?
You know, Winston.
No.
Everyone knows what is in Room 101.
What's really interesting about 101 is it's the end product of a structure of society based on lies, distortion, and enemy.
It is a space into which every reader can put his or her most dreaded thing.
Room 101 is clearly that thing which is the fear that you dare not give a name to, the thing that you fear the most, the thing that every fibre of your being resists.
Room 101, the torture chamber Winston Smith is taken to in George Orwell's novel 1984, contains the worst thing in the world. This unforgettable concept has haunted generations of readers ever since the book's publication in 1949. It's set in a futuristic London, but the locations within it were based upon the London Orwell knew. So is there, or was there, a real Room 101?
You've starved me for weeks. Hang me, shoot me, but not Room 101.
Room 101.
There are many theories about where Orwell found his inspiration. The prisons of Stalin's regime, the bureaucracy of post-war Britain, the corridors of the BBC where Orwell briefly worked, even the draconian public school he endured as a boy. Wherever it is, Room 101 has found a place in the national consciousness. In the centenary of Orwell's birth, a leading contemporary artist is trying to give this intangible notion a concrete form.
1984 is a series of projections. It's a projection of the world of international power politics at the time Orwell wrote it. It's a projection of the world of immediately post-war London with the bomb craters and the damaged buildings and the vagrant scurrying humanity. And it's also a projection of Orwell's interior life, I think, and some of his deepest fears and anxieties, as well as his thoughts about the malversion of truth and language.
In creating the dystopian world of 1984, Orwell invented a number of unforgettable concepts that have found their way into our culture. Big Brother, thought police, sex crime, doublethink. They've all come to embody our fears of totalitarian government.
If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
It had been one of my favourite books when I was a kid, for a number of reasons. One, because of its, political incisiveness and everything, but also because it was one of the few books that you could read when you were at school that had sex in it.
I remember as a teenager waiting for 1984 to happen, as if something profound was going to happen, and I don't really think it did. It was just this date and this in the calendar.
It's commonly believed that Orwell named his torture chamber after Room 101 at the BBC. Room 101 at Broadcasting House is being demolished as part of a renovation programme.
Room 101 will again be totally gutted, be stripped back to the bare brickwork, and it will be incorporated within the open plan design that's been incorporated for this building.
Artist Rachel Whiteread is taking a cast of the room before its destruction. Such work is not new to Whiteread. In 1993, her cast of a Victorian house proved one of the most striking sights in London, winning her the Turner Prize. Similar works followed, the Holocaust Memorial in Vienna, and now Room 101.
I was approached by the BBC to just come and have a look at what was, they thought, Room 101 at Portland Place. And then I just got curious, and then I went up to have a look, and then it was, this sort of extraordinary place that was completely full of machinery. Practically, I thought, what a complete nightmare. Beneath, below, and to the side of it, there was demolition work going on. You know, you felt like you were under attack. It's very much in the way I've been working with architectural pieces over the past sort of 10 or 15 years. I don't feel that it's moved anything forward or changed anything particularly. It was simply a kind of opportunity to sort of memorialise this space. I think what made me feel so passionately about doing it eventually was because of the, you know, because it was at the BBC, because of the Orwell connection, and because we were about to go to war at that point. All of those things kind of seemed to come together, and I don't know whether that's going to be apparent in the work, but that was sort of the impetus for making it.
George Orwell was living in London during the Second World War. The surviving landmarks from the Blitz towered over the surrounding ruins. From this debris, he began to see the landscape for a new novel.
It's possible to trace a kind of the 1984 walk. You know, you can start off at University of College London Senate House at Mallet Street, where there's the Ministry of Truth. You end up going down Charing Cross Road to Victory Square, which is Trafalgar Square, where of course was the big statue of Big Brother on what is actually Nelson's plinth, and the Propaganda Museum to the right, which is St Martin in the Fields Church.
1984 by George Orwell, page 5, the heart of the whole argument. The Ministry of Truth, Mini-True in newspeak, was startlingly different from any other object in sight. It was an enormous pyramidal structure of glittering white concrete, soaring up terrace after terrace, 300 metres into the air. From where Winston stood, it was just possible to read, picked out on its white face in elegant lettering, the three slogans of the party. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
For the interiors of the Ministry of Truth, Orwell looked no further than his place of work.
The atmosphere of the Ministry of Truth, where Winston labours, is pretty obviously based on his time in the BBC's Eastern Service in the early 1940s.
This is London calling the British Empire.
For 2 years during the war, Orwell produced weekly shows broadcasting to India. In his diaries, he expressed concern at the preference for propaganda over truth favoured by the BBC during wartime.
This is Pat Butler calling British forces in Gibraltar.
Orwell himself was not immune and found himself broadcasting information he knew to be untrue but beneficial to the war effort. Winston Smith's job at the Ministry of Truth requires him to rewrite old news stories to make it appear that Big Brother's predictions are always right.
An extraordinary error.
The speech was evidently misreported.
Grossly misreported, since the offensive, in fact, came in India.
South India, 3 days ago.
Exactly. Such a careless report must not exist.
Orwell was keen to work at the BBC because it gave him work of national importance to do, and he was, of course, unfit to serve in the armed forces. But he very quickly despaired of it and thought it was, I think he described it as being like the atmosphere of an exceptionally badly run girls' school, and you could never do anything. And also these layers of bureaucracy and protocol.
Orwell wasn't the only one who felt stifled at the BBC in the years during and immediately following the Second World War.
I was appointed as a producer in the North American service of the BBC in 1949. You got the feeling, in a way, having recently come out of the RAF, that you were still in the services. There's just the feeling that Big Brother was watching you.
My name is 846 Winston Seagoon. I am a worker in the great news collecting centre of the Big Brother Corporation, or as you knew it, the BBC.
Attention, 846 Winston Seagoon. You will be taken to room 101.
No, not 101, not the listening room.
While the goons were poking fun at the BBC, one wonders if they knew that at Broadcasting House there actually was a man keeping an eye on the political persuasions of the corporation's employees.
There was a certain Brigadier Stoneham, had his office not far away from room 101 in Broadcasting House, in fact room 105, and he was the person put in there as a liaison really between the personnel department of the BBC and MI5, the security service. And so when people applied for jobs, Brigadier Stoneham would check these people with MI5, and if they were considered too left-wing, they would have a stamp put on their personnel application form by this Brigadier Stoneham.
This is the room 105 where Brigadier Stoneham ran his vetting operation. The corridor ends here, in room 101. Perhaps Orwell was alluding to this when he named his fictional torture chamber.
He wanted something resonant, I think. He wanted something that would linger in the mind in the way that the great slogans of the novel linger in the mind. And of course, he had actually worked in room 101 at 55 Portland Place when he worked at the BBC. It obviously stuck in his mind as something resonant that he would then employ in a novel 4 or 5 years down the line.
The pressure Orwell felt at the BBC finally proved too much, and he left.
Only stop the pain. Stop.
But perhaps it's not the geographical location of room 101, but the unimaginable horror within that is the key to understanding its continuing power over our imagination.
Winston Smith is a member of the inner party. He forms an attachment to Julia, who is a younger female employee. They begin on this affair, which is also a political statement. Winston Smith has acquired a copy of the anti-text, which is the subversion of the whole idea of Big Brother. Then, of course, they are betrayed and surprised, because that's what happened. You're never safe from the telescreen and the prying eye. And they end up being interrogated in the Ministry of Love.
When he's captured and unveiled as a traitor to the party, he's taken to prison, and then he's finally tortured, and then he's taken one step further, as he's always known he's going to have to do, to room 101.
You once asked me what was in room 101. It is there that we have the means to root out the last lingering deception. Pick him up.
What George Orwell managed to do was personalise a particularly horrendous area of human activity, which is information by torture. At each stage of his imprisonment, he had known, or seemed to know, whereabouts he was in the windowless building. Possibly there were slight differences in the air pressure. The room where he had been interrogated by O'Brien was high up near the roof. This place was many meters underground, as deep down as it was possible to go.
I think it's terrifying because of the utter vulnerability of the prisoner, the utter isolation, the removal from everything that's familiar, and being put into a situation where you're never sure what is coming next.
What makes room 101 different to other torture chambers is that it is about the psychology of the person involved. I mean, this is really what I think Orwell was getting at.
What happens in room 101 is the worst thing in the world. It varies from individual to individual. It can be death by burning, burial alive, or something quite trivial, not even fatal. In your case, we both know, of course, that the worst thing in the world happens to be...
In my own experience of being a prisoner, it wasn't death itself that made me afraid. It was the fear of how I would die. I must say, being eaten alive by rats, if I thought I was going to have that torture, I'd be absolutely scared out of my life. I mean, the language that Orwell uses is graphic. I mean, it's almost too horrible to contemplate. And when I read that, of course, I remembered my own experience, and I thought, my God, mercifully, one never had that.
I think it's true to say that Orwell had this thing about rats. It's not quite accurate to call it a phobia, but he certainly had a fixation. And it goes right the way back, I think, to his childhood. There are letters from childhood to friends where he exclaims about the joy of whacking at the rats that come out of the sheaves of corn.
By itself, pain is not always enough. There are occasions when a human being will stand out against pain, even to the point of death. But for everyone, there is something unendurable, something that cannot be contemplated.
As you will see, this is a mask. It fits over the head, leaving no exit. When the plastic door is raised up, the rats will shoot out like bullets.
Rats are not as wild as you think. So they'd come up and they'd look straight at me, making me cross-eyed looking at them. And they'd turn round and they farted straight in my face.
Confronted with his worst fear, Winston finally succumbs to the party and renounces the last resistant strand of his individuality, his love for Julia.
Do it to Julia. Do it to Julia, not me. Julia! I don't care what you do to her. It's Julia! Julia, not me! Not me!
At Broadcasting House, Room 101 is close to being demolished. Rachel Whiteread's technicians have finished the cast of the room and, after leaving it to dry for a few days, have begun to remove it panel by panel. But other clues cast doubt on the claims that Broadcasting House was the likely location for the sinister Ministry of Love.
The whole thing's a little bit of a myth. And actually we were just talking earlier about the Ministry of Love not actually having any windows, so in which case, this is definitely not Room 101 because there are two very Gothic windows in it.
So is the search for a real Room 101 a futile one? Margaret Atwood, author of The Handmaid's Tale, Oryx and Crake and other dystopian novels, would be inclined to agree. Perhaps Room 101 is not a place, but a state of mind.
We're told that in 101 there is the thing that you fear the most, and only you, the reader, know what that thing is, and so you immediately put it into 101. If it was just rats, poo on rats, but it was rats for Winston Smith. For you, it's something else.
There's no doubt that in Room 101, Orwell created an unforgettable concept. How then did he stumble upon it? 1984 as a whole played on contemporary fears of authoritarianism, inspired by the descent of the Soviet Union into a totalitarian nightmare state.
Orwell's books were, of course, forbidden in Russia. They were absolutely prohibited reading. And if anybody saw you reading 1984 or Animal Farm, it would mean great trouble for you. And I think the whole book of 1984 is the book about this terrible fear that one experiences when one knows that one is struggling with a powerful state.
And yet, the fears inherent in Room 101 that make it such a powerful section of the book seem to go beyond politics, right back to Orwell's childhood.
Orwell went to a prep school called St Cyprian's near Eastbourne on the Sussex coast, and very little at all is known of his time there, other than the dramatic essay he wrote sometime in the 1940s called Such Were the Joys, where he absolutely excoriates the school's owners, Mr. and Mrs. Vaughan Wilkes, on grounds of snobbery, cruelty, contempt, you name it.
St Cyprian's School burnt down in a fire in 1939, much to the delight of many pupils.
One of the most fascinating things from the biographer's point of view about the St Cyprian's days and the essay Such Were the Joys is their connection to 1984, because it has been truly said by many a critic that the world of St Cyprian's is the world of the police state.
The cricket pavilion is the only surviving building from the school. Inside was the icy plunge pool that the boys had to run through each morning.
You had to walk up, come out of the changing rooms, walk up to the far end where the physical education man stood, and he was armed with, it seemed to be about a 10-foot bamboo cane, and as you stripped off and went up to the far end, he, if you didn't get in there quickly enough, he encouraged you.
The headmaster and his wife lived in this house. To the young Orwell, they were tyrants who submitted him to countless humiliations and floggings.
A near contemporary of Orwell's have literally remembered boys praying at their beds at night, please, dear God, please may I not fall out of favour with Mrs. Wills. The relationship between Winston Smith and O'Brien, who was interrogating him, at one point is couched very much in the imagery of the pupil-teacher relationship. I don't think he's actually, I think he may even be described at one point as resembling a headmaster or a scholar or a sort of sacerdotal figure. There's certainly, it is almost kind of cast in the idea of it being a delinquent pupil who is being brought in front of his headmaster for condign retribution.
O'Brien, said Winston, making an effort to control his voice, you know this is not necessary. What is it that you want me to do? O'Brien made no direct answer. When he spoke, it was in the schoolmasterish manner that he sometimes affected. He looked thoughtfully into the distance, as though he were addressing an audience somewhere behind Winston's back.
And there's another possible source for the perverse relationship between Winston and O'Brien.
Orwell had a very distant relationship with his father. Again, he thought that he'd failed his father. He thought that his father disapproved of him. I think it possibly be true to say that Orwell was in search of a father figure in that sense, and that, you know, in some of his books there is this quest for older male figures.
You will do what is required of you.
What is it? How can I do it when I don't know what it is?
You will find that you know.
I think that the themes of the book is about guilt, and it's no chance that O'Brien is called O'Brien, O'Brien being a Catholic name. It's about the guilt associated with the Catholic faith, you know, the fundamentalist religion of totalitarian communism.
In O'Brien we find hints of the schoolmaster, the father and the priest, and in Winston, the subject who, through circumstances beyond his full understanding, has failed him and been betrayed by him. This unsettling relationship plays a key role in making Room 101 a terrifying concept.
I think Room 101 has sort of made its impact, along with many other things that Orwell has said, simply because he was a very clever communicator, and he was able to fasten on to concepts that somehow lodge in the mind and produce fears, if you like, apprehensions, horror in some instances, that make us remember.
50 years on, Soviet Russia and corporal punishment are no more, but Room 101 continues to thrive, reinventing itself for each generation.
Well, I was working as a radio producer for BBC Light Entertainment, and I'd worked with Nick Hancock and a couple of pilots, as had every producer on the corridor. He was notorious for being in failed pilots. I think he had the record.
I'm Nick Hancock, and this is the entrance to Room 101, the warehouse of the worst things in the world.
There was an idea kicking around for a bad record programme, and we decided to expand the idea to include not just records, but people, places, concepts. He said, what about using the idea of Room 101?
And we'll send leggings into Room 101. Well done, Maureen.
It is deeply shameful, isn't it? It's deeply, deeply shameful. It is one of the greatest novels of the 20th century, and I've taken it and made it utterly trivial, and a lot of people think Room 101 is a television programme rather than a concept in a truly great novel.
Back at her studio in East London, Rachel Whiteread and her technicians have begun the complicated process of assembling the cast.
It's like having a jigsaw puzzle. We have a kind of map on the wall, we know where everything goes. Everything's brought over here, everything's labelled, and it all gets sort of put together. Because I actually haven't finished the work, and you know, we have it here now in the studio, and it's cast, but there are all sorts of other things that I need to do to it, and I need to think about it, and I also need to look at it as a finished work, and it's really at that point when I kind of work out why I actually made it. And you know, I might think, God, this is awful, I'll destroy it. But I kind of don't think so. I think it's, you know, I'm intrigued enough by it, and the surface is battered enough. You know, there's sort of pot marks, you know, they're just very sort of simple marks where there was, you know, maybe a piece of metal in the wall and something pulled out, and, you know, you pull it out and you just get a bit left like this. It's just like information, you know, it's like Braille, or, you know, you could just touch this and feel the work. I think Room 101 is a place that we don't know about. It's a place where we can sort of put our fears, but, you know, and somehow I've made it concrete by casting it, and now it sort of exists. But Orwell's Room 101 never existed. It was a fiction, and I've had a kind of rather extraordinary opportunity to cast what was a fiction, and we now have an object that isn't fictional anymore. It's actually there and existing.
The year 1984 has been and gone, but Orwell's message is more relevant today than ever. Surveillance cameras mean that Big Brother watches us all the time. New anti-terrorism laws have made thought crime a reality, and Orwell's far-fetched notion of doublethink now exists as political spin.
My goodness me, you know, doublethink is with us as we are here. You know, the fact that, you know, Osama bin Laden kind of been created and paid for as is Saddam Hussein, and then 10 years later he's the devil incarnate.
I found it the most frightening book I recall for many, many years, because everything that was said in it about 1984 is emerging in very, very clear form now. The abolition of history, the distortion of language, the permanent enemy, the demonization, the loss of civil liberties. And with Bush and Blair, Big Brother, I think, is here.
Nobody believes a word now that the Prime Minister is saying.
Love, love, I love Big Brother.
When so much of Orwell's book has come to pass, maybe we should be thankful that there's no real Room 101, as far as we know.
Australia on 4 starts on Monday with the story of 3 Aboriginal girls detained as part of 1930s government policy, attempting a 1,200-mile walk home. Moving film drama Rabbit Proof Fence is at 8:30. Tonight, music, part 2 of Folk Britannia on the 60s revival. Next.